Good morning to you. Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Saturday, the 19th of September, 2020. I am back in my office in Wilmington, North Carolina for the next few hours. Flew back from Houston. I needed to get some equipment. Got to spend a little bit of time with the family. Went to a soccer game this morning with my 9-year-old and my wife. So that's good. Then it's back to Houston tonight, where Mike Farrow, my colleague and good friend, is waiting for me with the rental truck and all of the other equipment. Luckily, we do have a lot of equipment. I just needed to come get some. I had shipped a bunch of equipment back from Colorado when I was there for the snowstorm. So I have come to Wilmington to retrieve all that, and we'll be armed and ready to go again here for Tropical Storm, maybe Hurricane Beta. Kind of not used to saying that. So let's take a look at what's happening out there, shall we? We have a busy map here for the time period. We have Beta out there, Teddy, Wilfred, and Paulette's trying to make a comeback here. Another system coming off of Africa that may or may not develop. We'll see. But the two systems that we're most interested in right now, of course, are Teddy, which is going to brush by Bermuda and then head up towards the Canadian Maritimes up here, Atlantic Canada, as we refer to it as well. And then Tropical Storm Beta, it's being sheared right now, but remember, like I talked about with Sally, I remember one of those discussions, I said something like, don't worry about what it looks like today, you need to worry about what it looks like when it makes landfall. And we all remember how that turned out. 105 miles per hour, maybe stronger, we'll see in the post-analysis. So, doesn't matter what it looks like right now, when they're out over the open water like Beta is, it matters when it gets to the coast, and it also matters what the overall impacts are, and that's what we're going to look at as we go forward. So real quick, Teddy, as you know, going to move up here towards Atlantic Canada. It will transition from a warm core tropical cyclone into a post-tropical cyclone up here as it passes eastern Nova Scotia through Newfoundland, and it'll be a big wind machine, rain and big waves, and there'll be some impacts, probably some power outages. And I would love to hear from many of our followers up in Atlantic Canada as things progress, as to what your impacts are. And this will continue to also send out very large swells towards the land masses over here. I emphasize that a lot because that's part of the overall impacts. And you're going to have some beach erosion and overwash and other problems associated with those swells. Fun to surf in if the surf conditions are right. I don't know much about surfing myself, but I know that big swells are generally favorable, but I guess they have to be clean and not all dirty and whatever with the way the wind angle is and so forth. But at least the swells are going to be there. You just have to be respectful of nature and understand that this is all bigger than you. Just be careful out there. All right? That's all we ask. Got to keep you alive. That's the first key here. That's my number one goal. All right, and then, of course, we have Beta, which is going to kind of meander around here. Very large tropical storm force wind field. That's this orange area right here, large area of tropical storm force wind. And as such, tropical storm watch for the yellow areas, which is basically from near Morgan City, Louisiana, all the way down to Brownsville, Texas, and almost the Texas-Mexico border. That's a huge area that's under a tropical storm watch, and then this pink area is hurricane watch, because Beta might become a hurricane. Now, at the moment, it is being sheared, and you can see that in the infrared satellite imagery here. Strong upper-level winds coming this way in a certain part of the atmosphere, and so it's kind of cutting across Beta, not allowing it to intensify. But real quick, before we get on with the analysis, I wanted just to mention the surge values, 2 to 4 feet, and I'm going to show you this closer. That's a large area of coastline, too, that could see a rise in water levels. And as you know, as you should know, a good deal of this coastline in here is very, very flat. And there's a lack of dune systems in a good part of the western end of Galveston over here, and down a good chunk of the Texas coast past Surfside Beach and Sargent area because of Hanna. Hanna came in and took out a lot of the dunes back at the end of July. So you see how all of this compounds on top of each other, these hurricanes, these storms. They're cumulative. Even years later, depending on what the geography of an area and the topography of the coastline, or the bathymetry, that's the underlying area underneath the water, that's called bathymetry. Anyway, it all matters. And so we're going to have some problems with beta, and I'll show you why, even if it doesn't become a hurricane. A couple of really neat things to point out here. This is the vorticity signature with that strong cold front. I was at that soccer game here in Wilmington. Stiff northeast wind, temperature in the 60s. It was kind of chilly out there, to be honest with you. There's the vorticity associated with beta, kind of elongated, stretching down into the Bay of Campeche here. Here's Teddy, very well organized. Here's Wilfred. And here's Paulette, trying to make a comeback. And yes, if Paulette does drift south and become more organized, it will still be Paulette. And it'll generate ace points once again. It won't get a new name, because the heart and soul of it here stayed intact. Even after it went past Bermuda and did this kind of deal, it stayed intact. So it stays Paulette. All right? So there's that. A couple things just to note here about beta. This is from our good buddy Jack, who does blogging for us via Patreon. An exclusive feature on Patreon if you're one of our patrons, even at the $1 level. Doesn't matter. If we could get hundreds or thousands of people to sign up at the dollar level, hey, you get access to Jack's awesome blog posts. But anyway, I digress. It's great to have Jack with us. And he still, of course, posts on Twitter. We do not have the exclusive. We don't own Jack Sellin. He just contributes to us, as well as the Hurricane Tracker app, a separate entity. We are not related to that app at all. But I'm just telling you, the internet can be a very friendly place, and we all try to work together. No reason to be all selfish and whatnot. And Jack contributes these great things on Twitter, and this is what he's talking about with the naked swirl appearance with beta this morning. And you can see the center of circulation in here probably somewhere. And then he goes on to explain why. Well, right now it is sitting under an upper level anticyclone, which is favorable. So where is that shear coming from? It's actually a little lower down, around the 500 to 300 millibar zone. In that zone, there's northeast flow coming in at the surface, and it's lopsided. That's the deal. So beta is being tilted, and that shear, combined with the intrusion of some dry air from central Texas, will keep a lid on the intensification for the weekend. However, as he mentions, and you can see in this green in here, there's still a lot of moisture associated with parts of the storm, and that's going to bring a lot of heavy rain potential, the potential for heavy rain to Texas and Louisiana, where you just don't need it, especially gobs of it. And then another person that I like to follow, this is Alex. Alex seems to know what's going on as well. And, there is some new convection starting to fire on the northwest side and the southwest side. Trying to figure out what I'm trying to say next. Sorry, I get ahead of myself. And it's because of the troughing that's in the area, this upper level trough, but that's supposed to move out. And it's going to be replaced by ridging, and the shear should lower, and that means that beta can still try to organize. And the water temperatures down here are very, very warm. And so all it takes is for the shear to relax, even for 6 hours. We saw what happened with Sally. The last 6 to 9 hours before landfall, Sally ramped up very quickly, and tropical cyclones can absolutely do that. So let's talk about impacts real quick, because that is the most important thing, is what is beta going to bring to you? All right, so what I want you to do is not worry about hinging everything on, well, I'm not caring about this system unless it becomes a hurricane. If it's not a hurricane, I don't care. You got to put that out of your mind, because Harvey in Houston area and southeast Texas as a whole, Houston, the greater Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur area, Harvey was not a hurricane. And you don't have to have a hurricane to have problems. All right, let's just make that very clear. So you got this low pressure area sitting out here. We'll just put an L for the low pressure area representing beta. And the counterclockwise winds around that will bring in a piling up of the water all along the coast here. That's the number one thing, and it's just going to be constant for days. tide after tide after tide cycle. So areas along the west end of Galveston, we can zoom in here and show you what I'm talking about. The water is just going to pile up over here. So anywhere from High Island down to Bolivar Peninsula, the west end of Galveston, down here to Port O'Connor and some of the barrier islands there. But I think it's this region here, Bermuda Beach and areas west and south from there, where you could really get some serious flooding, coastal flooding. Each high tide, you don't have a big tide range in the Gulf like you do along the east coast of the United States, but each high tide cycle, the water will come up. It's just being kind of pushed on shore with the constant flow. And so the water levels down here could come up 2 to 4 feet, maybe higher. So we got to really watch that closely. The other issue is that that could also occur up here where Laura impacted. Cameron, Holly Beach. You know, I was just there the other day, and people are trying to rebuild and get their lives back in order. And so there could be some water level rises there that will make recovery a little bit more difficult. And then there's the issue of the rain. Possibly heavy rain all along this area near the coast. Very difficult, if not impossible, to figure out exactly where the heavy rain will fall. We get an idea of the different hazards from the weather.gov homepage. You come down here, you click on Southeast Texas, and as it zooms in, you get an idea of the patchwork of different watches and warnings. Hurricane warning in the offshore waters, hurricane watch in the near shore right against the coastline, storm surge watch, and coastal flood advisory because of all the onshore flow. And eventually, once we know the rain pattern and what will happen with the rain a little bit in more detail, we're going to start to see flash flood watches and just general flood watches go up once that gets sort of pinned down in the model guidance. As it stands, we just don't know yet. You know, it just depends on the track. But overall, it looks like Beta is going to move around very slowly. We go back to the map here real quick and just kind of meander around. And as it gets closer back towards the Texas coast, it doesn't matter, I'm going to tell you right now, whether or not it becomes a hurricane. As it drifts back towards the Texas coast, that onshore flow is really going to be more persistent and a little bit more pronounced. And that flooding problem, I'm telling you, the coastal flood problems, as I mentioned, Surfside, Sargent, west end of Galveston, and other areas up to Bolivar Peninsula, you're going to have overwash. You're going to have standing salt water, and it's going to be a problem, you know, for people to go about their daily routines. You know, it's not like a huge surge event coming in like Ike. This is just going to be more of a gradual rise in the water, flooding the low-lying areas. Any waves that come in, yeah, there could be some homes that are threatened as well. So we got to take this very seriously and understand in the context what is probably going to happen. And the slow movement of it means that there is a harder, it's harder to understand exactly who, what, when, where, and to what extent. You know, because it's so slow moving. There's not much, you know, what can we do? We can just watch it. So anyway, I'm going to finish up here. Got a couple more things I got to do today. Then my flight leaves Wilmington at 3 o'clock, and I'll be back in Houston by 8 p.m. tonight. Mike and I will get to work tomorrow. Probably going to set up some camera systems. We have a few. You know, we do have enough inventory so that we can monitor this down along the west end of Galveston and then just see what happens, just like everybody else. So I'll have an update tomorrow morning for sure, and then we will go from there. All right, so I'll be back in Texas tracking Beta and everything else going on in the tropics. We're getting ready to enter what I call the second season, where we get another peak at the end of September and the first couple of weeks of October. A smaller secondary peak comes along, and there's hints in the modeling. We can talk about that more on Monday when I do a much longer general hurricane outlook and discussion, focusing on the current events plus a look ahead for how the pattern may be shaping up for the next week to 10 days. We'll address that on Monday. All right, so have a good rest of your Saturday. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it very, very much. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again when I'm in Texas again.